Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining this virtual session for faculty office hours for biology. My name is Grant Sewell. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an Associate Dean of Admission at Reed and really delighted to be here with you today to learn not only more about biology, but the academic program at Reed, the community, and just to kind of dive in a little bit more. And to do that, we're joined by one of our wonderful faculty members, Sarah, and I'll turn it over to Sarah in just a quick second for more of an introduction to kind of get us started. But wanted to welcome you all and kind of orient you to the session. And I would imagine you all might have kind of questions that you're curious to know more about, and we definitely want to try and speak to as many of those as we can. One of the best ways to ask the questions that are on your mind is going to be in the Zoom chat box. So I'm sure everyone's probably pretty familiar with Zoom at this point, but towards the bottom center of your screen should be the chat icon there. And if you have questions as we're going, please feel free to share them in the chat box. You might see that you're muted, and that's just to make sure the recording that we're using here can be shared kind of with other students as well. So the chat box will definitely be the best place to ask those questions that are on your mind, and we'll do our best to speak to as many as we can with the time that we have. But with all that in mind, excited to get us started by passing it over to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you here. My name is Sarah Schaack. I use she or they pronouns. I'm in the biology department at Reed College, and I've been in the department since 2011. So this is a baker's dozen for me in terms of time at Reed. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about and answer questions about um, studying biology at Reed, and that can take a number of different shapes. So one can be a bio major, kind of strict sense, but there's also other flavors of biology, other ways to be a bio major. We have some standing relationships with other departments that students might want to have an interdisciplinary course of study. And then, of course, there's always the possibility of doing what we at Reed call the ad hoc interdisciplinary program of study that you would design that could unite your interest in biology with your interest in any department. And that's always an option. So if you think about it, maybe as a wheel, I'll kind of start by describing a little bit about the bio major, but there's all these spokes of that wheel that you can tailor your course of study and your major planning to do what you want to do. So in the biology department, one of our main, um, I would say, trademark uh, ideas is that we really want students to not only be learning about biology kind of passively and through reading and listening, but by doing. And this is not, a new idea by any means. And it's an idea that kind of is woven through the whole curriculum at Reed. It's not just the biology department. Part of the reason why we have conference style classes in the humanities is so that you're engaging in the discussion and the interrogation of the ideas more actively than to just read it and accept what other people think about why Greece was the way it was. Same with biology. We want you to hear about the facts and figures, but we also want you to be able to make an argument for why you think something should be measured in a certain way, or what your hypothesis is about the relationship between variable X and outcome Y. So there's a very strong emphasis at Reed on problem solving, deduction, hands-on laboratory experience, independent student research. And that's really woven through the biology classes from the very first ones that you would take as a first year to our we call them our upper division lecture lab courses, but you really start taking those as early as your sophomore year. And then it's also inherent in the 400 level, the seminar courses that we teach at the most advanced level. Those are not necessarily going to have a lab component, but in those classes, we're working with and interrogating the primary literature as a group. And it's very possible that when we read a paper, we're going to decide that the inference that was made, there's not the justification, there's not the evidence there to support that inference. So the whole program of study is really I would say, data forward and research experience forward, compared to what you would experience at some other schools. So if that's something that you're looking for, I think it's a good thing to factor into the calculus of deciding about Reed versus other places. The ways in which that hands-on or independent philosophy can be felt by students in the lower and upper division classes is that almost every class has a lab component, and often the lab component has set labs that we do that I've designed or that the instructor has designed. But there's almost always in upper division classes a period of independent research where, given what you've learned how to do, whether that's PCR or sequencing in my labs, or whether it's some ecological modeling in another class, you will be asked to use the techniques that you've developed a sense of in your lab to design your own independent project, the answer to which is unknown to me as a um, first foray into designing your own project, collecting your own data. And does it always work out beautifully? No, but neither does most of the science that anyone does. There's a lot of trial and error. And so we really like to give experience to students with that, because if you only do canned labs that are definitely going to work out, it's probably not the best preparation for a career, either doing science or dealing with science or interpreting science or fighting for science to be done, or any of the other things that many of our graduates go on and do. Um, so that is kind of just a little bit of an intro to the philosophy of the biology classes, and those bio classes would be part of your curriculum, whether you are a straight up and down narrow sense biology major, or if you are a neuroscience major. So this is the standing relationship that the biology and the psychology department have with each other. We have a neuroscience program of study. We have a standing relationship with chemistry. That major is called the it's called biochemistry and molecular biology. We all refer to it as BMB for short, biochemistry and molecular biology. But that's really the standing interdisciplinary major for someone who's interested kind of equally in biology and chemistry. And you can look up the course requirements for each of these majors specifically. They're all on the course catalog that's online, but in spirit, this is a way for someone to fuse their love of biology with their love of chemistry. If you're a biology major, you still have to take some chemistry, even just as a regular bio major. And it's a few semesters, but if you're a BMB major, there's more chemistry, and in fact, there's more emphasis on biochemistry upper level courses that really are at the intersection of those two disciplines. In addition to the relationship with psychology and the relationship with chemistry that are very commonly pursued interdisciplinary majors, they're so common that you don't have to design them yourself. We also have an environmental studies program at Reed that is a college-wide program that has faculty members contributing to the program from many departments, from political science, from history, from biology, from chemistry. So those faculty members co-teach at the junior year a seminar that is interdisciplinary, not just among science disciplines, but among disciplines. So it has some history to it, it has some poli-sci to it. And that program, the environmental studies program, asks every student that participates in it to not just be an ES major, but to choose a home department with which they will also be affiliated. So, for example, you can be an ES bio major, or you could be an ES chem major, or you could be an ES history major. And those students have a shared experience through their ES classes, but they also have a shared experience with their counterparts who are biology majors, because they're going to be taking a lot of classes in biology as well as the ES curriculum. And I have had B&B majors thesis in my labs. My lab, I've had biology students thesis in my lab. I've had ES bio students thesis in my lab. And that is to say, and we'll talk more about thesis in a minute, but it's not like these groups of students are deeply divided and having no shared experience. They're in the biology classes together, but it's just a way for them to shape their program of study to specifically do what they want to do. Um, what else do I want to say about the flavors? Oh, there's also something called we call it the alt bio major. Alt is short for alternate, and that is a special one where um, if you want to be a biology major but you love anthropology and you're interested in taking a bunch of anthropology classes, and in fact the kind of biology that you want to do does not hinge upon knowing organic chemistry. You are not interested in biochemical reactions or molecular dynamics. You can be a bio major, and instead of taking the all of the required chemistry that's just expected of the bio major, which is 2 semesters of intro chem and 2 semesters of organic chem, you can actually trade and say, I'm not going to do the 2 semesters of organic chemistry. I'd like to do more coursework in a different allied field. And so the most common one that I've had students choose is to do alt bio with anthropology, because there's such a strong connection between anthropology. In some ways is many of the subdisciplines within that field are very, very heavy biology. But I've had students be alt bio where their heavy concentration was in music as well. And it's not quite a double major in that you don't have to take all the course requirements of biology and all the course requirements of music. You're still a bio major, but you're trading in that very historically emphasized chemistry as the allied subdiscipline for one of your choosing. Um, and I also mentioned that there is always the option, if you want to do an ad hoc interdisciplinary major, that means you want to say, I don't just want an allied field to be my concentration for graduation requirements. I really want to do a thesis experience, or I really want to take classes that fuse two disciplines like biology and history. You can design an ad hoc interdisciplinary major in biology and history. And one of the expectations of an ad hoc interdisciplinary major is that your senior year thesis experience, when you do that independent research project guided with faculty input, that you have an advisor from both of those departments, and that your topic that you pursue really represents the interdisciplinarity that you have been focusing on and practicing during the prior 3 years. Maybe I'll pause there and check in the chat and see if there's some questions about the major programs of study before I go on. Yes, my pleasure. I'm a proud she, they. Is it generally competitive to get into the biolabs? Is the student culture academically or socially competitive? So to get into the classes you want is typically not competitive at all. There are some courses that have wait lists. Occasionally, that might just mean that you have to take it the next semester. But one of the main goals at Reed is to make sure that we offer all the students that want to get into classes, the classes that they want to get into. And especially in your major, I've never heard of a student not able to get into a class in their major that they would like to take. In terms of doing research during the summer in a biology lab, there are funds at Reed that support student research. There are also funds from outside of Reed that support student research. Every summer, I usually have grant money to support 2 to 3 students. That's a pretty typical number across the biology labs, to have 2 to 3 students supported in the summer. And so if you multiply by 12 of us, that's 40 to 50 students that are going to be working in the labs across the department in the summer. So is it competitive? You do have to apply. You're not guaranteed a position in a summer lab environment. And I would say the earlier you start paving the road towards that, the better. How do you do that? In your first year, if you're hoping to do that during that first summer between first and second year, I would make sure that you are, if let's say you're working on campus in order to earn some money, try to pick a work study job that has a little bit of double dipping between your research interests and your need to make money. So you can work in the biology stockroom. We hire students as part of the hourly employees that we need in order to prep our labs. That job gives you some experience that you're going to be able to bring to your application to work in someone's lab in the summer, as well as earning you money. Whereas if you worked in the mailroom, I worked both in the stockroom and the mailroom when I was in college. So these are very real life examples. Um, I loved working in the mailroom. Actually, let me just say that because I found it very soothing to have a break from biology. I loved the alphabetizing, but that probably didn't bolster my resume when it came time to study or came time to apply for research positions. So if you can try to get campus work that will help introduce you to a lab environment, the second thing that you can do is to try to reach out to a professor in an area that you're generally interested in. And we're all very card carrying research scientists as well as being um, professors who love to teach. So it's not going to be a mystery to you what it is that I study. If you take a class with me, you're going to find out right away that I'm obsessed with transposable elements and that I study mutation rates. You're going to know that I work on Daphnia. And if you don't find that out from direct interactions with me, it'll be on my website, or you can come to my office hours. Every one of us have our office hours posted on our doors. Start to have those conversations so that you can figure out who you're most interested in working with. And it could be that you're pretty open-minded. You're like, I haven't had a research experience yet. I would be happy working with any of you. And in that case, you just want to extend a few tentacles out, and we will also extend tentacles out to you. We have an information session about summer research before the deadlines for those applications. But the earlier you're starting to think about where you might apply, the better your chance of being competitive for those. And if you don't get one your first summer, we keep a record every year of who's applied, and we know to give priority to folks that have not had a chance in their second summer. So these all work towards the common goal, which is to give people a research experience. And it is not only for certain students. And honestly, it's not about what your GPA is or was. It is much more about your enthusiasm and your ability to articulate what the goals are that you have for research experience. And then that if it's clear to me that I can help you meet those goals, then you have a very good chance of getting one of those positions. That is a great question. Um, is the culture generally competitive? I think that's a good question to pose to the students. I don't see it as competitive. I think most people who feel competitive at Reed are kind of competitive with themselves, kind of like track. Um, you want to beat your own best time, maybe. But I think one of the things that people will tell you about Reed is that one of the best things about it is the community. And I think very much across the board, students love helping other students. Excuse me. Our tutors are great. Our first year biology courses are staffed not only by a faculty member, but a lab instructor who is someone with a PhD in biology, but who is there to facilitate learning and help meet students where they are, and learning assistants, which are students that have taken Bio 101 and 102 recently and who are there to be kind of near peer mentors. So we really take a layered approach to that first year course. And there's a whole team of people that are rooting for you and your success. And there's no desire to minimize anyone's success for the benefit of anyone else. It is way less competitive an environment than the one that I've heard exists at other places. What about doing research outside of class with a professor? I talked about a little bit about that with a summer experience. There are other ways to be able to do that as well. You can, if usually not for first years, well, not definitely not for first years, I would say, and usually not often for second years, but occasionally. But yes, for third years, there's an independent study that you can always propose. Let's say hypothetically, you find out that I'm crazy about transposable elements. These are the kinds of mobile pieces of DNA that I study. And you want to do an independent study on transposable elements. It's not, we don't have a class on transposable elements, but I've had students do independent studies with me on mobile DNA, and that it just requires a short proposal. And then we basically design a class for just you. We meet once a week. There's reading, there's discussion, there's writing. Usually I have my independent study students come to my weekly lab meeting, which is my lab group, which is all my thesis students in the lab. They're going to be working on projects that are related to my research, but they're also, many of my thesis students work on projects that are completely and totally unrelated to my research. So every week, a different person has the responsibility to present at lab meeting, and that would include any independent study students that were working with me, and they would get a chance to talk about what it is that they're learning in their independent class. Is there an option to study ES biochemistry and molecular biology? You know, that's a great question. I have not seen someone do ES BMB, but one could be ES bio or ES chem. And there's no prohibition on taking the classes that are the BMB required classes as an ES bio or an ES chem major. So if you want to take the biochemistry series, which is 3 classes, you can. If you want to take statistical thermodynamics, which is required for BMB, you can. So no prohibition on making that happen. I don't think that's officially like a interdisciplinary major that also has an interdisciplinary affiliation. I don't think that exists, but you could do that program of study and call yourself ES Bio or ES Chem. What is the acceptance rate for the biology major at Reed? Anyone who wants to be a bio major can be a bio major. Is there an option to study the dual degree program in engineering when majoring in biology? It's true. I think our 3-2 relationships for dual degree programs with other universities, I know very, very, very few students who have ever done those. I don't think there's a prohibition on them. And I think they are really attractive for students who want the kind of learning experience that we provide at Reed, but they want also something like engineering. We don't have an engineering major at Reed. I think what ends up happening for most students is that they may become, because that's a possibility, and then they either love Reed more than they want to leave for that 2 years elsewhere, or they realize they really want to do a thesis. And so they end up doing 4 years at Reed. So I don't have a ton to say about the dual degree programs, just because I haven't talked to a ton of students that have ended up going that route, but they do exist. And I can't imagine that engineering would not be a kind of classic pairing with biology. It is also with CS, computer science. It is also with some of our other disciplines. And I would also say that lots of students that are going to go on in biology related fields do so without majoring in biology at Reed. So you can go to med school if you want to go to med school one day. And I mean, you're going to have to take the prerequisite classes from med school eventually. But I do encourage people to think about their 4 years of undergrad as being a time when you can you're done with high school, where there's a lot of prescription about what you take. You can study whatever you want, and if you do decide to go to graduate school, especially a professional program, it's going to be very prescribed again. So I really love being at a liberal arts and sciences college where there's this encouragement and this opportunity to take a lot of different kinds of classes across disciplines, because this is this unique time when you get to do that. So don't feel hemmed in by your major, and know that you also get to take electives no matter what major you choose. Do we like prospective bio majors to have taken physics in high school? I would say many have, but it's not, physics is not a prereq for any of the bio classes. And physics is not a requirement for the bio major. It is a requirement for the BMB major. What resources do you have for outside internships and job shadowing? There's it's called the Center for Life Beyond Reed. It's abbreviated the CLBR, and there's a great large staff of people, many of whom are either like actively growing the Rolodex. Does anyone know what a Rolodex is anymore? They're trying to actively grow the contacts list for students who want to do internships or job shadowing with companies either companies that have some connection to Reed because they're run by alumni or alumni work at them, or just companies in Portland, the surrounding area, nationwide. The director of the Center for Life Beyond Reed, Alice Hara, has really transformed the opportunities that that center provides students in terms of connecting to outside of Reed opportunities. And then for outside of Reed opportunities specifically to do bio research, our faculty in biology is a very well networked, very friendly group. And so whenever if I had a student come to me and say, I want to work on diatoms, no one in our department studies diatoms, but one of my best friends from grad school is like one of the diatom specialists in the United States. So I hooked Eli up with Andy, and Eli got to study diatoms. That's of course like an ad hoc situation. I just happen to know a diatom expert, but that kind of thing happens a lot where we would connect students with opportunities inside and outside of Reed if they're looking for research experience in something really specific that we don't offer. And even if I don't know somebody, I can always write a very compelling letter about the preparation that we provide at Reed that would make anyone very eager to have a Reed student come to their lab. What are the study abroad options for biology majors? So study abroad at Reed is overseen mainly by our international programs office. And the process there is usually to go talk to Alberto, the director of international programs, about when, where, and what you're kind of thinking. And you might not know, in which case he will be happy to give you some recommendations about where you might direct. But if you're already studying Spanish, you're a Spanish language speaker, and so that's something that you'd like to visit or revisit for study abroad, he can point you towards programs in Spanish speaking countries. And you can talk with your academic advisor about where that can fit into your 4 years. Usually it's sophomore, junior year, one of those semesters in that middle 2 years. Some people do go abroad their senior year, but again, that if you want to do a full year thesis, then you'd want to probably be on campus for the entire year. So it is something students do. Your academic advisor is going to be a faculty member in biology if you're a biology major, and they are going to be the best person to talk with about that. Like with anything, the earlier that you know that that's on your radar is what you want to do, the better, because then they can help guide you to the IPO is the International Programs Office. We have a lot of acronyms that read, and or recommend programs that you might look at. I've been the faculty member that's gone to some of the universities and programs to vet them. We don't have any Reed faculty led programs abroad. If you want to go study in South Africa, you would enroll at the University of Cape Town and go study in South Africa with support from the IPO. And or you could look at the School for Field Studies, which is an off-campus study program that runs typically very biology oriented off-campus studies. You could go do the IPO, you could go do the School for Field Studies program I'm thinking about Africa because that's where I spend most of my time, in Tanzania or in Kenya, that is a standing program they offer, and that we know that those courses will count towards your bio major. It's totally fine as a bio major to be like, I'm going to go study economics in London for a semester. It's just that you would want to make sure that you've looked at your other 7 semesters on campus in order to make sure that you're able to meet your major requirements and your other requirements. And you can focus that one semester on fulfilling the group requirements that economics classes would help you fill in, and use some of your electives to do that. I'm going to keep going to the chat for questions, but please, anyone stop me if there's like a follow-up on something, or let's see, study abroad. I hope I answered the study abroad enough. I think, again, 4 years, it goes really quickly. Study abroad changed my life. So I always encourage my advisees to do it, but it's not something that everybody has on their radar. And there are people who prefer to think about trying to get a research experience off campus or abroad during the summer rather than doing a full semester abroad for a variety of reasons. How does AP credit help you finish credits quickly? AP credits, depending on the score, can be applied towards the 30 unit requirement for graduation at Reed. No matter what your major is, you have to have 30 units to graduate. Um, and those AP credits can be applied as general credits, but no AP classes are used to fulfill the specific course requirements for a major. So they would kind of take the place of electives. You could think of it that way. And most students take more than 30 units while they're at Reed anyway. So it's good to have them in your back pocket. Don't not transfer in your AP credit if you have it. It's great to have there in the back, especially if, by your senior year, you're like, you know what? I'm doing this massive thesis project and I've got 2 jobs on campus. I don't want to take a 4th class in spring semester my senior year. Those AP credits can come in really handy then, because if you're just getting over the 30 unit, that's a perfectly good way to get there. I'm interested in pursuing medicine in the future. Could you tell me about what pre-med looks like as a biology major? Are there specific resources, opportunities, or partnerships offered to biology undergraduates? And this was upvoted. So we have the course requirements for medical school are um, slowly evolving, but they do change a little bit decade to decade, but they're pretty universal. And if you want to apply to med school, you can talk with your advisor about that, and they will talk through the typical med school. And this is true for dental school, vet school, um, all of the pre-professional, pre-health requirements are something that you can take at Reed. We do not have, though, an anatomy class. And so it's not, the biology department does not have a huge number of students that are focusing on pre-health careers while they're at Reed. Most of them are biology majors who might go on to a graduate program in the health sciences, but the focus of our classes is typically not about health related biology. And I think that that is good, even for our pre-health professional students. Why do I think that's good? I think there's a lot of stuff that you have to learn to be a clinician or a primary care provider or a surgeon, that you will learn in med school. And the foundation in order to do that work and to rigorously read and evaluate evidence that we focus on is going to be your friend all through a professional program. And at many schools where there is a pre-health track at the undergraduate level, they're kind of taking a shortcut around that basic foundational problem solving and knowledge and going straight to talking about health issues. But I think in the long run, it can do a real disservice to not have a fundamental grounding in genetics, evolution, and ecology and jump straight to studying where the clavicle is. And so that has been our general approach. We've had many students go on to do graduate programs in health sciences, and we're in Portland with OHSU, or the Oregon Health and Science University, which is one of the largest biomedical focused institutions, learning institutions in the country. And tons of our graduates go and work in labs there or end up going to medical school there. So there's a lot of connections with OHSU locally, and students that go on to med and vet programs elsewhere. Those connections are available, that advising is available. But while you're at Reed, the focus on health is not going to be very front and center. It maybe is a little bit more for a neuroscience major than it is for a regular biology major. Maybe a B&B major, if you want to do med school, a lot of the requirements for med school are encompassed in a B&B major, but it also has additional requirements that would prepare you for graduate school in biochemistry. they're more than what you need for medical school. So that's a conversation to have with your academic advisor early on if that's part of your plan. I would say I wouldn't discourage anyone interested in health fields from coming to Reed. This is a great place to study, but you're going to get a broader foundation than just health in our undergraduate program. Just out of curiosity, do all students, including biology students, have to complete an application for every class they wish to enroll in? No, you don't have to apply for any class that you enroll in. You just register for the class. Registration for next year opens next week. So the schedule was released. All my advisees, I have about 25 advisees that I communicate with regularly every semester. I tell them, okay, heads up, everyone, check out that schedule that came out and start looking at what classes make sense to you for next year. These are my office hours this week. I have special advising office hours on this week in particular when students can just drop in. They can also make an appointment with me. They can also say, Sarah, here's an email. Here's my plan. I've thought it all out. We don't even need to meet. The whole range exists, but the one of the best things about Reed, I think, is faculty academic advising. We take a huge amount of time and care in talking with each student about designing the curriculum that works for them, and you would never have to apply to get into a class. The second best thing about Reed is that we don't talk about grades hardly at all, and that really circles back to that competition question at the very beginning. Is it possible to have a concentration minor in studio art and major in biology / neuroscience, especially with having both long lab periods and long studio classes? I've heard it's difficult to get into art classes if you aren't a major. I believe there's a minor for studio art. Grant, you might be able to answer that better than I. Most departments at this point have a minor, but not all of them do. Biology, you cannot minor in.
Yes, I was just going to jump in and say, yes, that is correct. Studio art does offer.
Does have a minor. So yeah, that would be a really great way to make sure you're high priority to get into those classes. Studio art classes are really popular with all students because they're so awesome. And they're very size limited because you can only have so many easels in a room. So that is a good way to get yourself bumped up on the list. Asking because I do medical illustration to increase diversity in medical posters. Yeah, I think doing a neuroscience with a studio art minor is totally doable. Minors are relatively new at Reed. They were really asked for by students. They really wanted to pursue their passions outside their major and to have there be some kind of formal name for that. And so most of the departments that have the space in their classes have now added a minor. Biology classes tend to be really, really full. So we don't offer a minor, but you don't have to be a bio major to take you don't have to be a bio major to take bio classes. And in fact, I'm teaching evolution this semester. I have 20 people in the class. I think there's 4 or 5 bio majors and everyone else is from across campus. It's awesome. Hi there, can I change my major to a biology major if I'm admitted with a non-science major? Yes, you can change your major. You don't declare your major until the end of your sophomore year. So you have some time to be at Reed and experiment and take some classes. And then by the end of your sophomore year, you're asked to declare a major. But even if you declare one, it's not etched in a stone anywhere. It's just so that you are informing your advisor and the college that this is my intent. And so we can make sure to advise you if that intent doesn't change. IB credits, it looks like Grant answered that one. Thank you so much. I feel like academic inquiry and knowledge of science would be way more helpful for me in my EMT class. My background knowledge has helped me a lot in understanding the mechanisms of the diseases I learn about. Glad you have a very science-based focus. I am biased though, because I do just love research. Yeah, I mean, it takes all kinds. And I wouldn't say that I think that learning, you can think of it like a cooking class. Like sometimes you want to take a cooking class where they teach you how to make mozzarella cheese. And sometimes you want to take a class where you learn the fundamentals of how all cheeses are made. And then you feel empowered to not only make mozzarella cheese, but to make whatever cheese you want and to make an aged mozzarella and so it's kind of like that. Like we have this opportunity at Reed to to talk about how all cheeses are made. And so we go that route. And it doesn't mean that sometimes on a Thursday afternoon, you and I are working on the lab and we are just banging our heads against the wall trying to get this mozzarella to form. Like there is a practical side to it some days and in some moments, but we really, I think I'm speaking for an entire faculty right now, which is maybe a little bit big of me to do, but I think most of us think that in the long term, you'll be well served by looking at both big problems and specific problems, both, and practicing with moving between them than to just focus on the very, very specific problem of today. So we think about problems for the ages. Um, yeah. Is this registration for freshmen as well? No, this registration is for continuing students, first year students. Once they are all decided and all that, will get an opportunity to register in the summer. And all of the classes that are open to first years and upper division students, we reserve spots for the first year students so that they're not all filled up with continuing students by August. I think I got to the end of those questions. Are there other questions out there? Grant, is there anything that you would like me to chat about that I might have missed?
Feel like you've covered a lot of ground, but I know you did mention wanting to maybe share a little wisdom about the senior thesis or maybe
Oh,
some
yes,
works
yes.
you've advised. So I figured I'd throw that in. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So in biology, especially, students do a senior thesis, either one that has a laboratory research component where they're setting up an experiment. For example, in my lab, we work on an aquatic microcrustacean called Daphnia. So I'll give you some examples of what different types of biology majors could do for a thesis in my lab. I have a neuroscience student right now who's looking at Daphnia social behavior, doing experiments to see if Daphnia prefer to be with a group or if they prefer to be in isolation, and setting up like a Y chamber is what they're called, in order to um, allow Daphne to make a choice and to see if that choice is consistently to be in a group or to be solo. And then a couple things about their, like, groups of males and females or groups of same species or different species, to try to explore that a little further. That's a neuroscience experimental thesis in my lab. I have another student who wants to go to vet school. So she decided she didn't want to do an experimental thesis. She's really busy applying to vet school. And she didn't think that, since there are no vets on campus and she's doing tons of vet tech research and hands-on experience as her off-campus job, she's like, I just want to write a great thesis and I want to learn a lot. And so we talked a little bit about her passions, and she's writing a paper, a thesis on sea turtle, basically genomics, phylogenetics, paleontology, disease, and conservation. So she has like a 5-chapter thesis, really taking a 360-degree look at all the current literature on sea turtles, which are a highly threatened species. We have the whole genome sequence of a few sea turtles. What have we learned from that? We have population genetics data sets for sea turtles. What bearing does that have on sea turtle conservation? We have information about migration pathways. What have we learned about the vulnerable life history stages of sea turtles? She has learned more about sea turtles this year than I can even imagine. And as a vet student, she's not necessarily going to be a vet of only sea turtles, but this was going on a deep dive into the biology of an endangered species was helpful for her course of study from her perspective. An ES bio major might do a thesis in my lab. Daphnia, this aquatic little creature that I work on, are what's called a bioindicator species. So if we're interested in the effects of toxins or contaminants, we often test what the impact of those toxins or pollutants or metals are for Daphnia, and use that to make limits for the amount that companies are allowed to dump in waterways or runoff, etc. And so someone who was interested in ES Bio might set up an experiment looking at Daphnia responses to pH, and they might assay using gene expression techniques how genes are either turned on or turned down with exposure to high, low, and medium pH. This is a project that someone did last summer in my lab, not a thesis project, but they're an ES Bio major. So the opportunity to do experimental work is there for everyone, and most students do choose that. But sometimes students in biology are like, I want to push the field forward, or I want to do a major synthesis, but I don't want to do my own experiments, and that both of those options are fine. I would say since COVID, there's more students that are exploring that latter option, because for 2 years it was really hard to do experimental work, and I think for some people it just became more customary to do that library research and work on your own. And in fact, if you're doing a thesis in many disciplines, you are doing most of your research in the archives or in the literature. So it's not an uncommon way to do research. But in biology, typically you'll do some kind of experiments or lab work as part of that. And there's money available, to support your research. You write a short proposal and you can get $1,500 in the fall. You can get another $1,500 in the spring if things go well. And so you can actually, I mean, I've had many students do thesis projects that we later wrote up and published as peer-reviewed publications. That's happened at least, I don't know, I've lost track of how many times that's happened in my 13 years at Reed, which is a good sign that I can't count anymore. So definitely the goal there is to do real science that has an impact not just on the individual's learning experience, even though that's the primary goal, but in many cases has impact on the world. Let me think if there's anything else. Oh yeah, I'm interested in blending history and biology together. What options do I have? Well, there's an ES history major in my evolution class right now, and I'll just use her as an example. She's studying uh, water, um, stuff related to water policies and legislation and the impact on the environment and changes over time. So our ES, as I mentioned, our ES program has one faculty member in history, one in biology, and just because you are in ES history doesn't mean you can't do a thesis that has a lot of biology to it. And if you are ES Bio, you don't have to only do a thesis with the ES Bio faculty member. That person's name is Aaron Ramirez. He's amazing. He works on plant ecophysiology of especially trees and in tree canopies. So if you thesis with him, you get to climb tall trees and measure all these interesting variables and leaves and pines, and it's really cool. But you can do an ES biothesis with me. You can do an ES biothesis with our microbiologist who studies plastic degrading microbes. So lots of options. Probably I'm giving too many examples to keep track of, but it really will be like something that catches your attention. You're not going to be given. I'm not gonna say, Grant, I really need you to do this research on Daphnia microbiome. If that's not your thing, you're not going to do that. But if you're coming to the thesis experience without having had much research experience on your own yet, and you're like, I'm an open, clean slate. Can you give me some suggestions about cool research ideas? I and everyone will, of course, be happy to tell you whatever it is that we're excited about or that we think might mesh with your interests. Do I know of any biology students that have combined their knowledge with public health? Absolutely. One of my former thesis students, this is another good example for, she was interested in public health and she wrote she did a thesis that was not experimental. She did it about the 2013-2014 Ebola outbreak that became a pandemic. And she did this beautiful 360-degree examination of what were the physical, molecular, political, legal, infrastructure, public health, social, historical influences that made Ebola has happened many times in many places, but this was the first time it had become a pandemic. It had spread to multiple countries. And she went really deep on that particular outbreak and the subsequent pandemic. And her paper, her thesis got condensed. We rewrote it into a short version, a digest of a lengthy project. And it was published in the Journal of Health and Globalization. And it's been cited over 100 times. It's like a very influential resource for people who want a beautiful synopsis of the importance of all those factors I mentioned on helping a viral outbreak go from being containable to not containable, which was a really interesting question, and really sad question that she was able to answer and spend time with for a whole year. Even though we don't have a public health per se, she had taken classes in anthropology related to medicine and health and science. And she'd taken a bunch of classes in biology, and she was able to make this class, the thesis class, her own. And she ended up getting a MPH at OHSU, and I heard from her not that long ago. And I've got a couple student stories like that just from my dozens of thesis students that I've had.
I say, Sarah, I think we have time for one more question, and just hearing you talk about kind of all facets of Reed and saying you've been here for 13 years, maybe I'll end with, what is it that you love about Reed?
Mm. I really, I am a internally motivated person that I never um, totally felt like I fit in at any of the places that I've been. And most of the time that was fine. I went to a very nerdy high school, and it was fine that I was a big nerd. But I have really loved being at Reed because the chance that you're going to bump into someone else that just really, really likes what they're doing and wants to be able to enjoy doing it rather than justifying to the world why it's worth doing is very high. And so I've really enjoyed the extra time that I get to do the things that I like to do because I don't have to justify why I'm such a nerd and doing them. I get to reallocate that time to doing them. And it doesn't mean that I don't have to justify it sometimes. I have to write grant proposals and I have to write papers and I have to explain why it's important. And I like doing that too. Honestly, I like giving talks to the public and um I like communicating, but I also love all that time that I've recouped to just do it. And I think that students at Reed get to pursue their passions and their interests with um with abandon. And I like being around that. I like that vibe. I also like the fact that my closest colleague at Reed, who I talk about science with the most, my science, he's in the philosophy department. He's not in the biology department. And he understands the questions I'm asking, and he asks questions that are really similar from a very different angle and using a very different set of tools. But there's no place else I could be where my closest colleagues were in philosophy or music or history, rather than being in biology, because everywhere else it's big and the silos around disciplines are too strong to reach out and connect. But that is not the case at Reed. And in our seminar series, I'm the person who organizes the seminar series for the bio department. We had the new studio art faculty member come talk in the bio seminar series about her work with Joshua trees. And that kind of like intense cross fertilization. I wasn't a double major, I wasn't an ad hoc interdisciplinary major, but I love being around that.
Offer a tremendous thank you to Sarah for spending some time with us today to share a lot more about the work that Sarah's doing at Reed, the work the students within the biology space and kind of beyond are doing as well. And wanted to offer a tremendous thank you to you all for making some time and having such great and thoughtful questions. We know there's sometimes maybe more questions that are on your mind. And so in the chat, I also wanted to share some contact information for admission and our current students as well. Within our office, there's a variety of students who have a lot of different perspectives, not only on the academic side, but the community side. And so please feel free to reach out to them. I know they're always happy to chat. And we'll also have additional faculty office hours coming up. Tomorrow we have philosophy at 3 o'clock. We have biochemistry on Wednesday at 4, and then physics on Thursday at 4:30, and a lot of other great ones that are coming up. So please feel free to check those out. With all that in mind, I want to thank you all again for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much. And please feel free to email me too if you have any follow-up questions. I am happy to answer them.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.